as far as Kai goes, I think that we had been talking the first time about any thoughts or impressions in regards to him. Obviously, there's a lot of hype and hope about him that he could become the first full-blooded Filipino to reach the NBA. 19 years old, so certainly shown flashes. But as far as what your impressions are now, having played against him twice, what do you see the pros and the cons of him so far, and as far as what the hype about him is?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, he's massive. He's really big. And obviously I'm only like 6'1", 6'2", so everyone on the floor can kind of seem big, but he's like a genuine 7 foot plus. Like he's actually long and tall. But he does have a touch. So I can absolutely see the upside. I can absolutely see the potential. Like he does have some guard skills and like control with the ball and stuff like that. So I think from that standpoint, it's super exciting. And I'm no like scout or analyst or anything like that, so I'm not going to go into too much detail with that. But one thing I did notice is he kind of has a poise to him. I remember the first time he came to Wollongong to play us, he was at the free throw line, and we have a rule in the NBL where if you miss 2 free throws in a row at like an opposing gym, the crowd gets free cheeseburgers. So he stood up to the free throw line for the first time, and our fans smelt blood in the water seeing this, tall guy at the line. So they start going nuts, and Kai I remember I was on the bench at the time. Kai kind of walked up and just kind of iced both of them without, any hesitation or worry or stuff like that. And usually, the fans going nuts, smelling that blood in the water is enough to intimidate some. So I have noticed he does play with like a certain level of poise and control. Obviously in his career, he's played, overseas and in some big stages and stuff like that. So that's definitely going to help. And yeah, I mean, the NBL wouldn't have drawn him and given him this sort of buzz unless, he had the potential to do what they're saying. So the potential is definitely there for sure.
Yeah, and I was going to say in the game that I saw, the most recent one, that he kind of started out a little bit slow. That he's not necessarily a starter, which I know some of the comments were going on about that. But, he did get significant enough minutes. And I thought it was really interesting that, you guys, Illawarra had a fairly comfortable lead, even going into the half. And that he was really kind of at the forefront of the comeback, where they did match up with you eventually. And, you guys fortunately, again, pulled ahead. But he seemed to be a pretty critical part of that. Like his performance actually got upped out coming out of the second half, and did seem to be part of the effort to get back in the game, really.
Yeah, he was. The interesting thing about Adelaide and the team he's on is that they have, up until about a week ago, they had 3 really nice big men. They had Isaac Humphries, who's now out for the season with an injury, who's, went to Kentucky, has been in and out of the NBA and stuff like that. Daniel Johnson's like a 10+ year veteran, and then Kai. And they actually have another guy named Cam Bairstow, who used to be one of the best college players that I've heard, and then also had a stint in the NBA. So the interesting part with Adelaide is that, they're very big dominated. They throw the ball inside and stuff like that. And on any given night, one of these guys can kind of be really dangerous. So, and yeah, Kai definitely had stints which were problematic, but, they're a lot to handle just because, when they're throwing the ball inside, you've got to definitely give it enough respect and attention. And then that can kind of open up other guys on the floor. So, yeah, that's one team we were happy to kind of take care of.
One of the things I think that, you mentioned that actually last time about the bigs that he has around them and everything. Here's kind of an interesting question, at least for me. Hopefully somebody else finds it interesting too. Do you think you see any influence in some of those guys that, like you said, they're terrific players in their own rights? You now played against Kai twice and Adelaide twice with him. Do you think that he might be picking up something from them that you see, or that he's in a really good situation specifically? Like he's a really good passer. That's always kind of been the report on Kai. But do you think you see anything in terms of growth of his game that you think, I wonder if that's attributed to one of his teammates?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm not 100% sure. I haven't studied his game enough to know like the progress he's made this season and maybe the influence there. What I do know is that you can kind of see, it's interesting to show how, I guess, the generations of players kind of dictate the way they play. I think the older guys Cam Bairstow and Daniel Johnson on their team are very a little slower paced, have nice footwork, a little craftier and stuff like that. Whereas, Isaac Humphries, who's, a few years older than Kai, is a lot more dynamic, a lot more athletic. And then there's Kai, who's also that more, I guess, kind of dynamic and athletic mold. Like, he can really move. But at the same time, I can definitely see the craftiness there. So what I will say is that he's definitely in a good position to learn from guys. I think Cam Bairstow, I can speak on, was a teammate of mine last year, has impeccable footwork, is extremely crafty in the paint and stuff like that. So I think, I can't say for sure, but I can say that, he is in a position to be watching and learning from guys like this who are, veterans of the game and have had 10 plus year pro careers, and can kind of, I guess, take gems from them as to how they've prolonged their career and had so much success. And the exciting part for Kai is that he does have, I guess, the athleticism and the younger generational play style to go with that.
Kai is young. Kai is green. He's a teenager. He's 19 years old, but he's big and long. In the NBA these years, big and long players, they're playing differently than they used to. You've got guys like Giannis who are 6'10", 6'11", who are, handling the rock at the top of the key and things like that, and driving to the post looking more like a small forward type of player, rather than your run-of-the-mill center that, camps in the paint. You talked about his defensive ability as well. One of my questions is Kai Sotto well-rounded enough at this point, if he were to get drafted in the NBA in the next couple of months, to make an impact in the first season? Or is he going to be the type of guy that's going to be green going into the NBA and is going to need a couple of years before he really gets to the point where we hear his name a lot, he can be a starter, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And again, I've only seen the 3 games live that I've played him, and a couple on TV and stuff like that. So I don't want to speak, out of my own square here, but I think there's no clear absence of, skill or ability or anything like that. I don't think there's one thing you can look at him and be like, like he's a terrible shooter or he's a terrible part. Like, there's none of those skill deficiencies. I think his biggest challenge is, maybe between in his head, can he be aggressive enough to draw enough, NBA or overseas attention? Can he put up the numbers that I guess is required to kind of flag that interest? Because I mean, he does play on a team with a lot of bigs, and he does have a very talented team around him. And it's definitely, obviously it's a team sport. But at times I think I noticed that maybe he's not as aggressive as he can be. So I don't know. I mean, obviously it's polarizing, numbers aren't everything, especially not in the NBL. It's a tough league, the paint's packed and stuff like that. Guys don't put up ridiculous numbers, but at the same time, I think, if Kai wants to, I guess, take that next step, you look at the guys who've made it out of the NBL at young ages, like LaMelo and stuff like that. They kind of hang their hat on the triple double or the 30-point game or something like that to kind of get that sort of attention. So I definitely wouldn't be surprised seeing Kai take the next step. Obviously, there's a heck of a lot of hype around him, and he does have the tools and the skill set to be that exciting prospect. But I think, if you were to ask me how's he going to get out of the NBL and take that next step, I guess he's got to, find his place in a system or find a way to be, aggressive enough to be an absolute problem in the NBL and get that interest to take that next step.
And I'm interested too, as more and more mock drafts come out and see with a draft that he is in as a prospect, will he be as a 7-footer? He's obviously going to garner a lot of attention just for the fact that he has the size and he has played professional basketball as a teenager. That alone with that sort of experience is important. But I'm always curious if a guy's going to end up a lottery pick, because the difference between being a lottery pick and a non-lottery pick, big difference in terms of money. Could he, hold out another year and stay professionally, maybe try another league before he comes to the NBA? It's always interesting to me, those sorts of things. And if he may need, an additional year overseas before he comes into the NBA to really solidify his stock as a draft pick, because we're talking a lot about his skill set too, but there's still so many unknowns for a 19-year-old green player who's playing professionally. Looks pretty good, but there have been times, as we talked about earlier in the interview, where he's, a couple of bad halves here and there, it's hard to judge for sure. And there's a lot more money going around in the NBA than in other leagues like Australia. So it's always an interesting question to try to see where he fits into a league that's changing, a league that where people like him are changing, whose roles in general are changing a little bit with the times as the speed of the game increases a little bit. So I'm always curious about those sorts of things. It's an interesting question to me for sure regarding his future status. So, I mean, in terms of mock drafts, we've compared him to other bigs that are in the league with him. We've compared him to some of his peers as we've gone through this. So, I guess one of the main questions I have in terms of his stock overall and what you've seen from him is, what would you then see as his role in the NBA now when he goes in? I mean, his defense is good enough, you know, to be in there with his size and his shot blocking ability. His athleticism is pretty good. Maybe he's not as well-rounded offensively as he might need to be to play 25 or 30 minutes. Is there something that you could speak to specifically that you think that you would see him as a role at this point?
I guess it comes down to what position he's going to play. I think if he's going to be a classic 5-man, a true center, I think there's probably going to have to be a time where he puts on some sort of additional size so that he can compete with the bigger bodies. I think he doesn't necessarily have a struggle against, true centers in this league, just because he is that, a couple inches taller and a couple inches longer, can kind of make up for that. But I guess there's going to be guys in the NBA who are his size plus whatever X amount of pounds. So I guess if he's going to be that 5 and fit that mold, there's probably going to be some strides taken in terms of his strength and weight and stuff like that, so he can compete with those level of bodies. But if he's going to stretch the floor, then probably he's going to have to work on his jump shot a little bit to get that, up to a level where you can, use him in pick and pop situations and him being a valid perimeter threat. So I guess it's just up to, what position NBA teams see him fitting in as. And then if he goes, the bigger route, maybe put on size. If he goes the smaller route, he's got to establish himself more as a shooter. But, as I spoke on, he doesn't necessarily have a big deficiency in any area as far as I can see, but maybe it's about finding an identity in one of those positions and kind of developing a reputation in one of those positions.
I guess one of my last questions about him is that, and it's related to this whole discussion of where he fits in, because when somebody goes to the NBA, it's a lot about role, and where they fit into the team, where he fits into a lot of the plans in terms of the mock drafts and stuff like that. So from your perspective as a person who's played basketball a lot overseas, and you played against him, and you've also played against a lot of other people that have had varying levels of NBA experience and some other NBA prospects, do you think that someone like him could benefit from another year overseas and maybe hold off for a year?
Again, an interesting question. I think there's definitely scope for it. I think the reason I'm saying that is because I think there's potential for him to find a better situation personally, where he may have a better statistical or all-round season.
Yeah.
Obviously the best way to prepare for the NBA is being in the NBA. I think that's straight up, that's how you develop the best and stuff like that. The NBL is, not that far off, in my opinion. It's not necessarily a terrible place to be to develop. But I think in terms of maybe Kai's stock and I guess getting the most he can out of himself, there's definitely scope where, he may benefit from another year in the NBL. His team was kind of thrown together last minute because they had a coaching change very late and stuff like that. So there's definitely factors involved which don't play in his favor with his current situation. So I think maybe if he would have another year in the NBL or another year overseas, I think there is potential that he could find a better situation for himself where he does have a more successful year, put up better numbers, and then potentially increase his draft stock.
Well, Isaac White, thanks for joining us for Australia once again to talk about Kai Sotto. hopefully every one of his fans will come here and see this video and make a comment and share it amongst themselves. We're happy to have you to talk about him and anything else. And you've been quite a guest for us as you've been here. And good luck to you on the rest of your season in the NBL as you go forward. I don't have any rooting interest in this, but I got to say, in the battle between Kai Sotto and Isaac White, I have you in our corner.
I appreciate that. Thanks for the ongoing support. Thank you.
Yes, and again, like and subscribe. If you've watched this video and liked it, watch some of our other videos here on our YouTube channel, Expat Hoops.